Hi, I'm Mark Bradford. I live and work in Los Angeles, California. In some ways, this is like a 30 years of migration of public space, what it kind of would look like if you could visually see a wall or a landscape changing, or cyclone fencing changes, where most of this came from. In the 90s, it was basically service industries, from what I remember, mostly for black women. Me being a hairstylist, I think I was my eye would catch it very quickly. Braids and weaves, locks and twists. I always liked locks and twists because it was about twisting things together, blending things together. But as the kind of public space changed through migration, more Latin people came into historically African American communities, and that added another layer. But it was still mainly service industries. I remember more electricians. I remember more, they introduced music into the landscape. And when I say landscape, I'm talking about free space, cyclone fencing. A lot of the free space and cyclone fencing actually came after the '92 riots, when there were so many burned out lots in South Central. They put up cyclone fencing. And out of that came all of this kind of public use of it for services. The second layer, it really got more expanded. There was music and there was still service industry, but still service industries. And what I remember about the Latin service industries, it basically it catered to Latins and it catered to black people because it was still central to South Central. And then the third layer, and that was the early 2000s, after the kind of the collapse of the housing market, and then you saw a lot of predatory, and that became about housing. Most of it will buy your house fast cash, and that really felt like, and that was for everybody. Predatory lending, predator for everybody. It didn't discriminate. And you really saw that layer on top, and that's the most recent layers. House. It is a palimpsest, but it's a palimpsest that stretches back for me to the 90s, the early 90s, when I began to pull these signs. A lot of the signs that I worked on in this, I had to go into my own archive because many of the signs no longer exist. Braids and weaves, locks and twists don't exist in the landscape as much as they used to in the early 2000s. So the way in which it moves, the way the landscape moves, the way migration and people moving out and people moving in, but it's right there in your face. You don't even think it's there. When I first started collecting merchant posters, there was no word for it. They just said, "Oh, you mean those billboard, those things in the environment? They just exist in the environment, visible and visibly invisible, like so many people." And those layers of histories is what this work feels like, and it really is from Los Angeles and the area where I did business and have done business for the last 30 years.